I've been doing road trips centered on parks and roller coasters for many years now. Trips through both coasts, the South, the Midwest, almost the whole country. After my move to Europe 3 years ago, I was able to continue that trend through Germany, the Benelux, France, Scandinavia, and the UK. I hope to cover those trips one day, but they were all week to week and a half long trips. And after a few years in Europe, I was starting to get some serious FOMO over all of the incredible looking new roller coasters that had opened in America since I moved. So thanks to a recent budget increase and a big helping of vacation leave thanks to the Dutch government, I could go on my longest, most expensive, most insane coaster trip yet. Three weeks of insanity. I'm sure that other enthusiasts on the internet have done longer trips, and 3 weeks may not sound that long when you account for rest days and travel. This trip is not that. In my 3 weeks on the road in America, I plan to cram in 27 parks, which of course means more than one park on a few days. What time of the year to go? I'm a fan of doing US-focused coaster trips in August. You miss most of the summer rush for crowds, most new coasters for that year should be open by then, and many early season issues like staffing, training, and mechanical issues shouldn't be a problem anymore. But there was a problem with that this year. I had multiple small parks planned towards the end of my trip, and they were either not open on weekdays in August or had inconsistent information online about ride availability. And one of these parks had a certain plane-themed coaster that I wanted to make a major milestone credit. And since I had a bunch of credits to get before the milestone, I couldn't start the trip with the smaller parks and work backwards. I had to save them for the end of the trip. So, no August. How about May or June? Maybe I could get my trip in ahead of the main summer rush. Unfortunately, most regional parks in America aren't open daily until Memorial Day, the start of June. Also, there were quite a few new for 2025 coasters opening this year. I had to plan my trip late enough into the year to allow time for them to open, and 2 of them were at Legacy Six Flags parks. Thankfully, I can count on Six Flags to be reliable and always deliver on time and open their rides as advertised on schedule. Yeah. As a result, I had to plan this trip for the second half of July.
How did I lose?
I knew I needed to fly into somewhere on the upper East Coast. This would have happened on Saturday, July 12th. I had also made plans to see family in Iowa 2 weeks later, on the 26th. This meant I had 2 weeks to get from the East Coast to Iowa and 1 week to go back. I could have returned to Europe through a different airport, but having to pay for separate flights from different airports and return a rental car to a different airport gets expensive fast. Any travel-savvy viewers already know this. As mentioned earlier, a few days had more than one park planned, but I otherwise knew that I would be at these parks from open to close. I would drive between the parks at night and on the mornings of the visits. It is very important not to get sick while on any coaster trip, and also important not to become exhausted and risk your safety due to all the travel involved. I know from personal experience that I can go about a week before I get too tired and need to take a rest day. So I planned in just 2 rest days on the Saturdays. Every other day of the trip was park focused. I suppose it goes against typical tourism logic to spend 3 weeks traveling in the United States and not do a single one of the typical tourist things here, but I'm sure coaster enthusiasts will understand.
Yeah, baby.
That 27 parks figure isn't an exaggeration. I had a lot of catching up to do, but even with 3 weeks of time, I just couldn't get to every park I wanted to do. Hell, even with a 4th week added to the trip, I still couldn't do everything. My previous biggest year ever for coasters in America was 2022. So much travel done that year. So for this coming trip, I prioritized parks that I hadn't been to since 2021 or earlier. This included Dorney Park, Hershey Park, Silver Dollar City, Lake Compounce, and the almighty Thuzy Mecca, Cedar Point. I also plan to end my longest drought of visits so far, Kentucky Kingdom, with my last visit coming just over 6 years ago. I also plan to get a few new parks, a few parks that were convenient stops along the way, and parks that added something new since my last visit. But I did have to make some sacrifices during planning. At first, my last park to hit before crossing into Iowa was Indiana Beach. It wasn't a big priority for me to stop here since my last visit was in 2022, but this time, All-American Triple Loop was finally open, allegedly. They even took out the god-awful shoulder restraints that everyone kept complaining about. But as more and more reports surfaced online about how often the ride was closed, in some cases for entire days, it became harder to justify a visit. Even Diary of a Rollercoaster Girl got spited by the ride when she went this past June. She did eventually get on the ride after visiting a second day, but that meant changing all of her plans and coming all the way back to Monticello for this one ride. And even then, it didn't open until about 3 in the afternoon. So once a nearby Six Flags park opened their new for 2025 coaster, Indiana Beach's fate on my trip was sealed. This park would be dropped from my plans and replaced with Six Flags Great America. The limited time meant I had to skip a few other fantastic parks too, like Kings Island, Busch Gardens Williamsburg, Coney Island, Six Flags Over Georgia, and Carowinds. Though I did manage to sneak in 2 hours at that last one on my way to Family Kingdom. So now the plan... Oh yeah, there was one other complication. The news of Six Flags America's permanent closure this year stunned the entire community. This would be the first Six Flags or Cedar Fair park to close since Geauga Lake's closure 18 years ago. Visiting this park one last time immediately became a priority for every American coaster enthusiast. I had to move a few parks around to find a day for my visit, but I ultimately settled on between Six Flags Great Adventure and Hershey Park. And with that, the trip planning was complete. Once the day of the trip finally arrived, I went to the airport, crossed the Atlantic, got my rental car, and began the journey. So the plan is just coasters, hotel, sleep, and repeat the whole time? Yeah, that was the plan. But for those of you who have never been on the road for more than a week straight before, you have no idea the amount of problems you could encounter. Traffic, bad weather, car problems, the list goes on. I had some sort of tire issue on every single one of my week-long trips across America, and they all disrupted my plans by requiring a mechanic to fix them. I could repair small tire leaks myself, but the need to stay on schedule and not miss anything hits a bit different when you're over 1,000 miles from home. And this trip was no different. As soon as I drove my car off the rental lot, I get a notification that the tire pressure on my back left tire is too low. Okay, annoying, but not a big issue. Just need to take the car to any gas station with a pump, spend $1 and fill it up, maybe a few times. I can deal with that. So I did that. And I did it. And I did it. Again. It seemed like every time the car was off for more than a few hours, it would be a problem again. Also, was the tire pressure actually low? Or was some component or sensor on the tire faulty? I know my cars, and the tire always looked fine to me, but the last thing I wanted to deal with was getting towed out in the middle of nowhere. Again, thousands of miles from home. Here's a fun fact that I learned during the trip. Many rental car companies do not include spare tires with your rental. And if you ask for one, they just tell you to call roadside assistance instead. Go ahead and guess if my rental company included one or not. So no spare tire for me, and I had to deal with either a slowly leaking tire or a faulty tire part that was giving me bad information. This came to a breaking point when I woke up one morning and saw that I had a tire pressure of 10 psi on that tire. Or at least that's the reading I got. Again, the tire looked fine for me, But after driving through thunderstorms and flooded roads in New Jersey the previous night, that was the last straw for me. Oh yeah, I was basically stranded overnight in a small town in New Jersey due to torrential downpours and flash flooding.
Up to 6.5 inches of rain fell in just a few hours that turned streets into rivers and neighborhoods into lakes.
I've never seen flooding like this.
Triggering flash flooding and water rescues throughout the state.
Do not recommend. On top of this, I had to get to Hershey Park that day, which was still a 3-hour drive away. So after a few stressful phone calls to the rental company, God, automated phone systems for some companies are just the worst. I was told I could drive into any rental lot that was open for the day and swap cars. I began my drive to Hershey Park, switched cars in, I don't know, somewhere in Pennsylvania? Got my new rental car and hightailed it for Hershey. Somehow, I got to the front gate of Hershey Park just 15 minutes after they opened. Definitely could have been worse. I went through hell to get to this park today. And of course, when you consider that my safety was at risk here, only missing Hershey Park's rope drop by about 15 minutes isn't that big of a problem. Fortunately, there were no more car issues the rest of the trip. Shout out to that one Avis employee at that airport for being the best in making the swap happen. Alas, the other major problem I had to deal with was every American park's greatest nemesis: thunderstorms. I already mentioned the flash flooding in New Jersey, but I had to move parks to different days of the trip constantly while on the road. For example, after Hershey Park, I knocked out Six Flags America, Canobie, and Six Flags Great Adventure. Then I needed to head west from there. Sounds a bit strange, doesn't it? Why not do Six Flags Great Adventure first, and then hit the other parks while naturally traveling west? Because according to the weather forecast for Hershey, Pennsylvania, the day with the smallest chance for storms the entire week was Tuesday. Same thing for Wednesday in Bowie, Maryland, Thursday for Ellisburg, Pennsylvania, and Friday for Jackson, New Jersey. This was a multi-$1,000 trip, and every park on the trip was important. If I could do anything to limit the number of weather delays I experienced, or weather closures, I would do it. So I had to do the annoying thing and not drive in a straight line at all over the course of the trip. Plans over all 3 weeks were changed as I attempted to dodge bad weather. Thankfully, my efforts paid off, and I only had one bad weather day on the entire trip. Okay, bad weather, car problems, logistical challenges aside, let's finally get positive. With so many coasters and so many parks on this trip, it would be a miracle to get through every single one. There were many missed coasters that I didn't care about as much, but the 3 big ones for me were Wooden Warrior, Pantherian, due to alleged problems with its lift hill motor, and Jersey Devil, due to Great Adventure, I guess. I had planned to get on over 40 new credits on this trip, 5 of them opening this year, and I managed to get on every single one. Again, planning your trip for later in the summer season helps with that. This included Lost Island's new RMC Raptor, Fire Runner. I swear, my first visit to that park ever took place less than a week after that ride officially opened. Hell, that visit was so close to Fire Runner's grand opening that the concrete around the queue fencing for that ride hadn't finished drying yet. Thanks to this trip, I have 5 coasters in my top 50, 2 of which are in my top 5. Here's a potentially better stat. I was able to get on 32 coasters that are currently in my top 100. And considering that's over 800 credits, that's a big deal. I'll save the best parks and coasters I experienced for future videos. But for now, I'm just happy this trip was so successful considering how much was at stake. You can expect videos on individual park days coming soon. Thoughts? Questions? Do you want to share a similar experience you've had from this past summer? Mention that in a comment below. And it's obvious, but I'm pretty new to this platform. So let me know what type of content you want to see next.